is Carol Spooner. I'm a portrait photographer. I specialize in storytelling for businesses and portrait for family and individuals.
Hello, I am Choma Janelle Efejedia. I'm a registered social service worker and a psychotherapist. I have been in the mental health field for over 10 years now.
Awesome. So what kicked off this conversation is that we know that Shonda Rhimes is dropping a new documentary on Netflix talking about Black Barbie. So it made me think a little bit about representation and what that means to us, and how what it did for us when we were growing up and what it's doing for us now in our respective fields.
Absolutely. So maybe now we can just jump in and get into the topic and the conversation.
So for you, I guess, how can I start? What is your representation story?
Ooh, okay. So my representation story goes very, very deep.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one of the things is, even from growing up, I was privileged to go to an all-black school in Canada.
Oh, wow.
Right? So I had gone to a school called Shiloh.
Okay.
It was very West Indian, very tradition in the uniform.
I'm sorry, where's that here? Ontario?
Yeah, that's in Ontario. It was in Brampton. It was a small private school that my parents had put me in. I was struggling in the public school system because we lived in Toronto, by Church Street in a housing community, and the teachers weren't supportive. So they decided to ship me to my grandparents, put me into a private school in Brampton. And that was like the beginning of me recognizing the importance of my identity as a Black person, as a Black woman. Kind of that formulating steps is everyone around me was Black, from the teachers to the principals, and they did a lot of instilling Black culture, Black pride, Black excellence.
Wow.
From a really young age. So like I had really gotten a foundation, and I know that is a privilege that oftentimes a lot of people don't get. And I think I carried that with me throughout the years, so subconsciously. And I think now, as I get older and I recognize the importance of representation, especially being a mother and raising my own kids and saying, okay, they need to be a part of community so they know how they identify, what they feel comfortable in. And I think a part of it, especially when we get older, when we get into our professions, when we get into school, we start putting on masks. We start putting on masks to,
I agree.
Yeah.
My story is totally different.
Okay, let's hear your story.
Well, I would say mine is more of a lack of, because I was raised in Montreal, Quebec.
Okay.
And my schooling was majority white. I think in my class I had a consistent 3 people that were Black in my classroom. But my community where I grew up, my block was Black, right? But I didn't have not one Black teacher I had one Black teacher for one class in all my 5 years of high school, and that was it. Everyone else was white. So in terms of professionals or people in positions, I didn't have that. So where I saw people work is like they were coming home from the factory, or they're coming home from domestic work. There was a lot of people that were domestics in my surroundings and stuff like that, so I didn't see that. To see people, honestly, in Quebec was difficult. And I would, I actually, as a photographer, obviously I gravitate towards the pretty, everything that looks really good. So to go and see all the images that I wanted to see, I would I'd walk down to the pharmacy. I had no money, but I would stand in the pharmacy for like an hour and a half reading Essence and Ebony for like an hour. Yeah. So I didn't have, they didn't bother me. I'd stand there and I'd flip through. I'm like, oh, that article's good, and I'll read through, because that was the only little bit of food representation that I got, and I loved seeing them on the magazine, and they look so beautiful. And I could pick them out easy. It was like bottom row, right down in the middle. That's where Essence was, and everything else, Mary Claire and all of them took up the rest of the stand.
You know, I think it's such an important part how you touched upon you had to go seeking. And I think there's oftentimes we seek for that representation, we seek for that identity. And, you know, with this documentary that's coming out, I think it's making it easy, right? Like there's less seeking, there's more of an awareness of how you bring in some of that representation so younger generations aren't doing so much seeking. They're actually starting to say, okay, cool, this is here, this is a part of, and I'm represented in all circles.
Yeah.
Right? And I think it's beautiful, even at a young age, knowing that there was lack of, you were still able to say, okay, I'm gonna go seeking for this because this is important to me.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think now it's so easy, like it's everywhere. You flip up your phone. And also, I think Black culture is so attractive to everyone, every culture now. In terms of style, everyone is mimicking. Music, people are mimicking. So, I mean, I've always loved my culture. I've always loved Black beauty. And I think the world is catching on, finally.
So, and I think that's a good segment because like you are in media, you're in photography, right? And you're seeing like an array of representation coming out in media. What does that mean for you as a photographer, as a professional in the media industry?
Oh my gosh. I think because I've always had an attraction to it, so I always went looking for it, that it's not new to me. Like I loved it so much. I remember saying that to myself. I'm like, I love being Black. And even when it wasn't an advantage to me, I'm like, I wouldn't trade it. I wouldn't trade it. I don't know, there's something about us when we run, when we throw that ball, when we do art, everything. I just love it. What I do wish is that I wish that I knew the stories behind the people that made a difference, because I never knew the story about the woman that helped to create the Black Barbie.
Yes.
I didn't know that a Black man created the Super Soaker. I didn't know what we invented. You know, if I knew those things, I think I would have had more of a confidence. I would have had more, I wouldn't be so shy with my voice, you know, because I did wear a mask for a very long time. And I thought that that's what you had to do to be accepted, to be okay, and also to do well.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And you know, it's funny because I did have a lot of those learnings from a young age of like, you know, what we've done, our contributions, you know, and it kind of really empowered me to say, okay, I can do anything, like, you know, because I seen that, I seen, you know, we had such significant contributions to the world in general, but I wasn't immune from unmasking, right? Like I still masked. And I think that is an interesting concept because what I found is when I went in spaces where I wasn't represented, I was too much, right? And that feeling of being too much always came with some type of, you know, consequence. And because it came with a consequence of, I had to learn to say, okay, I have to adapt to this. Granted, this only happened when I was in white spaces, right? When I came into like spaces that were like Black or any racialized space, I didn't have to mask as much. I felt like I could show up a little bit more authentically. I felt like I could have a voice. But oftentimes, and I think it also came to the point of I always had to prove myself, right? When I was in white spaces. So I remember there was a role that I had when I got into leadership. I was a supervisor at an organization, and there was a Black manager. And having her as a representation of, no, you can have a voice, like, what is that? Even just as a mentor was so powerful to, you know, that part of representation. And I think sometimes when we think about representation, we think of just the image, but I think there's also the piece of, who are your mentors on the other side of that, right? Who is guiding you through that? Because like, one, they're setting the path, and I think there's enough of us now that have been setting that path to say, are we finding mentors within that representation story?
Yeah, definitely.
I know, food for thought.
Did you have Barbies?
I did.
Okay.
I did have Barbies, and I actually had white Barbies.
Same here. I've never had a Black Barbie.
Yeah, I think the thing is, Barbies were expensive, and my parents were lower middle class. Buying Barbies were the last of their priorities. So if I got a Barbie, actually there's one Barbie that I remember. It was a Christmas Barbie. I think it cost maybe $40 or $50 20 years ago, right?
That was a lot of money. That was a lot of money for 20 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And and there was actually a white one and a Black one, and she was wearing a green dress. I will never forget this Barbie. She had a green dress, and I picked the white one, right? And I just liked the contrast. My reasoning then was contrast against her skin, right?
Yeah.
And realizing I didn't pick the black one. I don't know if, and this is me thinking back now, it's like, if the shade of Barbie was different, would it matter? Would it change? And maybe, right? Because I still didn't see myself, which saying this out loud sounds like really bad to me right now, but I still didn't see myself in her, right? I didn't see myself in the white Barbie, bear in mind, but it just felt more appealing. And I remember that Barbie, and I'm pretty sure I had other Barbies, but that Barbie in particular was my favorite Barbie. My cousin also popped off her head. Thank you, Chantal. Thank you for popping off her head. I was very hurt and cried, but that was my favorite Barbie.
Yeah,
right.
I think you think it maybe had to do with value, because I mean, you have the two Barbies. They're both $40, and then you're looking at them. Which one should you pick? Like, which one looked better to you?
Actually, no. I remember what it was. The black Barbie was more expensive.
Oh.
The black Barbie was more expensive.
Okay.
So I think it was also like a little bit of a compromise. Like, yeah, there was all of these other pieces.
Yeah.
But the white Barbie was more affordable.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah.
Because like knowing my mom, she also would have probably pushed, but like money is tight.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So
and there's no reason for that. Why would she? Did she have a bigger dress on or something?
no, same thing.
Wow.
The black one was just more expensive.
No, I don't ever remember shopping. Barbies came to my house through birthday parties. Those were gifts. And I always got the blonde Barbie. And we lived in, we called it the Gardens. So it's a little gated, hood for us. And we used to go into the apartment buildings on a rainy day like today and sit in the apartment buildings with all our Barbies and all the dresses and redress them and everything. But I never questioned or desired or say, why isn't she black? And it was just the norm. So it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't a big deal. But if someone was to give a little girl a black Barbie first today and say that was your only choice,
Speaking about just the Barbie story, so my niece, I was talking to, her dad, and her dad was like, she said, and kid you not, this was like maybe 2 weeks ago, she's like, I like the white Barbie better, she's just more prettier, right?
Oh no, still.
And that's today. That's like fast forward, here we
saw
are.
That.
She's probably about 4 or 5,
Yeah.
right? And I still think, there's that perception of what that value is of the black Barbie and the white Barbie, right? And some of it is how we internalize it at a young age, right? And what is that doing for our self-esteem? What is that doing for our well-being? What is that even doing, especially as a young age, in terms of our identity formation and development, right? Like I said earlier, I had that privilege of being immersed in blackness from a young age, right?
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes when we don't have that, it does weigh on us, right? It impacts, like you were saying earlier, that voice, right? Feeling, okay, how do I have a voice in a lot of these spaces? And I think that's something that often gets missed from the conversation.
Yeah, I think so too. I think also in terms of seeing yourself, it's that confidence that you're okay, that you're accepted. And I remember on the cover of Ascnd when I first saw Queen Latifah.
Yes,
Queen Latifah.
Yes.
Number one, yes, beautiful black woman, but also she wasn't the typical size 6. And I was never. So I really gravitated towards her to see how beautiful she was and how confident that was the biggest part of her, how confident she was in her skin. And then she went on to say, was it CoverGirl she's with? She went on to say, yeah, her CoverGirl is as pretty as, and I'm like, yes, that for, she wasn't the size 6, but still had a confidence and walked tall. And I think that was the most thing that jumped off the page for me.
I forgot about that. Thank you for reminding me. I remember Queen Latifah in her CoverGirl era, and just her boldness. And I think that was so empowering to even that growing up story, right?
Yes.
That coming into womanhood story of, wow, I'm seeing these black women, seeing a lot of my people represented, and again, not constricted to a standard of what white beauty is, right?
Yeah.
It's recognizing beauty is beauty all across the board, right? And I think Queen Latifah did such a good job of being a disturber in that field, of saying nah, we all need to be included, right?
Exactly, and she didn't come off aggressive. No. She didn't come off you know, sometimes when you feel that you have to make a stand, you have to show up, you have to speak louder than in order to be heard, then people start to back away from you because they think they're going to get hurt or called out or embarrassed or, you know, the angry black woman kind of persona thing.
Yes.
But the way that she did it, that always impressed me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, I start to think about like Michelle Obama. I'm sorry, like we gotta bring in like Michelle Obama into this piece too, because for me, what she did in terms of representation as a black woman, at that time I felt like, oh man, we don't have to just be in entertainment.
Yes.
Right? We don't have to just be like a cover of something. Like we can actually contribute meaningfully, right? And I know Oprah was also there, but again, like still in that media representation. And I think for someone who, like me, who isn't necessarily in media, but in like the mental health profession, I always said, what are the other expansions? I remember going through a phase in my early 20s when I seen a lot of my friends becoming like really successful in like media stage, and I was like, I need to be in the media, I need to do this, but that didn't speak true to like who I was, right?
Yeah.
And I felt like that was the only way to like have the sense of like conquering like my identity in that piece. And then when I see Michelle Obama, who was like, okay, I'm like the president's wife, but I'm also a lawyer and I'm also these things. I was just like, yes, yes.
She opened up another lane and gave us some room to work in other spaces, because we're not only about the arts or athletics. Exactly,
right?
Yeah.
And I think that is something so powerful, giving another lane, right? Even Issa Rae, I'm sorry, I got to drop Issa Rae because Issa Rae is my girl. I love her, love her, love her. And I think she was a writer, right?
Yeah.
Like she's a writer. And I think the reality is there are so many different lanes when it comes to representation. How do we get them like out there? How do we show like these are the different areas that, you know, as black girls growing up, like this is what it is. And tying this back to Barbie, remember Barbie, like the white series of Barbies is Barbie as a doctor, Barbie as a horse rider, Barbie as
she's Barbie, a lot of careers. Yes.
A lot of careers, okay. And I think that also has to go for now black girls growing up. They like, if Barbie is supposed to be this, you know, basically like I'm empowering women, then there needs to be that representation of black Barbies in all of those fields, right?
Yes,
because you know, just even to my growing up story, like seeing that was important.
Yeah, I have 2 little girls, and I remember I bought. They're 14 and 12 now, but they went through their little Barbie phase, and I had bought a poster, and the poster had all Barbie's careers. Barbie was a doctor, she was a vet, she went deep sea diving, all those things. But also, that was when they were getting dolls, that's when Barbie shifted into inclusion. So they had plus size Barbie, they had Asian Barbie, they had Barbie with, I think she was missing a leg, I believe. Okay. They really tried to cover the spectrum of everyone. So, I mean, different hair types for Barbie as well, I did see that. So that was in the 2000s. Yeah, you know, my kids are not in that field anymore, so I don't know what Barbie's doing these days.
Right.
But I mean, the history of it all was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like my daughter had a brief history with Barbies. I feel like, she had such a brief history with Barbies. And I think actually that's not true. Her Barbie journey was watching the cartoon.
Okay.
Right? The cartoon of Barbie. That was her. And I think that was like the next evolution of kind of Barbie with like this generation is watching on TV.
True.
And I have watched some of those episodes, and there's still not a lot of representation.
No, the Black Barbie is the one that shows up for so often to go to the beach.
Exactly.
I just watched an episode the other day.
Yep, she's a
not
sidekick.
On purpose.
Yeah,
but yeah,
she's a sidekick, and I think what does that say to young black women that are growing up, right? Of like how do you navigate this space, especially when, you know, we talk about now we're actually in professional settings and we're masking and we're not having our voices and we don't necessarily know how to like always position ourselves, right? And they're learning these things from a young age.
Yeah.
Right.
But you also said something earlier about seeing the representation in other fields outside of media. I think that that's important, but I also think it's important at every stage, as you're coming up in your business and you're doing your stuff behind closed doors with individuals and so on. I would love to see you show up and talk about what you do, and that field is important. Because my girls, they're not going to see it with the stuff that they're watching and the stuff that the people in my life they may introduce, but they don't know what you do. And I'm like, show up with the topics. Yeah. Like, you know what, when Barbie comes out, and when Little Mermaid came out, and everyone was talking about representation of Little Mermaid, they never even thought to think that Little Mermaid can have dreads. Yeah. You know what I mean? And we want to see you. I would have loved to see you to say, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a possibility? Yeah. To be, really? I would never have thought of it. Because all I saw was, behind the scenes stuff, blue collar stuff, and then the exceptional here or there, the Oprahs and stuff like that.
Yes.
So the lawyers I would have liked to see, the doctors I would have loved to know.
Okay, so we got to show up more in our professions.
Yes,
I will snap my fingers to that. Yes, we do. That's
true.
I think that's a word, right? Like, I think you're right. I think it's like, and I think this is the beautiful thing about like media and like other professions, because I think this is where like they can bridge the gap for like representation of saying, okay, like how do we spotlight these different professionals, these different settings to show, that diversity, that inclusion, that there's more than just meet the eye, right? And I think those are like really beautiful things. Right?
Yeah. Okay. So what would be your takeaway from this? Like if you were talking to the younger you?
So if I was talking to the younger me, I think the takeaway would be, don't ever dim your voice, right? Like your voice matters.
Yeah.
When you feel like masking, find, are there other people who've done this or have been this as like, just as a way to feel empowered, right? And shoot, if the Black Barbie is a little bit more, buy the Black Barbie.
True. For me, I think I would say, just for how my self-confidence was really low when I was a teenager and stuff, I would probably say to turn off the TV and just listen to everything in audio. So if I took everything in audio, it wouldn't have mattered who was saying it. I would have said, you know what, that lawyer, I want to be that lawyer in the room. Or I wouldn't have seen my doctor as the only one with authority being, and I could be that person in the room. It never occurred to me. It just felt like it was for them, and whatever, was left was for me.
Yeah. I think that's so empowering, especially when we go back to the story of like, hey, Barbie just kind of shows up for the beach, right? Like Black Barbie just shows up for the beach. And I think even tying it into that part where you're just like, well, everything else is left for me, right? And it's like, I think those are sometimes like the narratives that get placed out there, is everything else is left for me. Like you get the crumbs, you get the leftovers, but never, actually I can do all of these things. My grandmother, like bless her soul, my grandmother used to say, basically there's no limit. She used to say the sky's the limit, so you better reach for the sky and above, right? And then me and my smart self came in my early 20s. I was like, there's greater limits than the sky, Grandma. And she's like, I'm glad that you think like that. Make sure you go beyond that then, right? And I think again, like really instilling from a young age the importance of that sense of self, right? And even being like a therapist and doing mental health, a lot of times what people do struggle with is that sense of self, that core identity of who I am. And there's definitely that influence from outside, your environment, right? That impacts, that shapes you. And then we start having these internalized messages, right? That starts to say, okay, well, I am less than, like, this is just the status quo, this is the norm, I need to, like, tone it down, I need to, like, just take whatever I get, I'm not supposed to be in this authority role, I'm supposed to show up as the sidekicks. And I think that's the importance of representation, is it tells an unconscious story. It gives people the ability to internalize that. And what if we flipped it on the head? right? What if we told stories that were empowering, uplifting? Everybody would have that sense of there is no limit. Like I can do and be all these things and all these wonderful things.
Yeah.
And really come to that sense of self-actualization. I butchered that, but
that's all good.
know?
I get it. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think I tell my girls when they leave school that one line that I said, ask questions and give answers. That's me trying to tell them to show up in the room. I want to make sure that they try to show up in the room for themselves. So ask questions. If you don't get it, or if they're not seeing you, whatever, speak up. And I go into my kid's class and her teacher's like, she's not afraid to correct me. She's like, I got something wrong on the board. And she's like, no, sir, that's not it. I'm like, yes.
I love that.
I wore the badge of mom that day. I'm like, yes, ask questions and give answers, show up.
I love that. I love that. And again, instilling that in them from such a young age. It's so important.
I know.
But I'm gonna take that. I'm gonna take that nugget and put in my pocket. I'm gonna tell my kids the same thing now. So thank you. Thank you for that,
You're welcome. You're welcome. You're already working in your field and so on. So how do you feel the Black community shows up for you?
Okay. So I think my field is really interesting because obviously it's mental health, and I think there's like lots of stigma when it comes to this. And I think for me, I think it's less about how my community shows up, but I think I have a responsibility to show up for my community, right?
Beautiful.
And
That's beautiful.
I think a part of that is really looking at how do I have that culturally responsive support. And I think it's even in my work and the decisions and the modalities that I choose and the way how I practice is really being aware of there's strengths that come in being a racialized person. There's strength that comes in being a Black person. How do I tap into that as a resource, right? How do I make sure that is front and center first? So I think it's less about, again, how they show up for me versus how I'm showing up for them. And I'll give you a prime example is a lot of times in mental health, there's a lot of pathology. So they start with, the symptoms. The depression, the anxiety, the lack of motivation, the lack of focus. While those things are all true, when it comes to like Black individuals, that's not how we understand mental health. We understand it as the self-care, as the community, as the coming together, as like the, soul food that brings healing. Because like, listen, we can be feeling down, and as soon as we're in the right crowd, the right energy, all of those things switch. So I think it's really of, looking at that strength first, right? Recognizing, cool, what's your self-care? How do you take care of yourself? What does that look like? How do you show up for your community? How do you show up for your loved ones? I think it's even more imperative as Black women, because a lot of times we wear this hat of we are the caregiver, we're the ones who's giving, right? And I say, we're the ones who are always taking care of other people. How do we now step back and give that care to ourselves, right?
And I think the answers are cultural, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They are very much cultural.
Yeah.
And again, that's the point, is how do I pull those in when I'm doing a session with a client, or if I'm doing a workshop or a training, because those are the things that are so important. And I'm sorry, like our resilience is community, our strength is community. So if I'm not tapping into just showing up for community, showing up in that space, and just even looking at that overall health, I'm missing the mark. And a lot of it, again, it's back of how do I show up for the community versus how they show up for me.
Perfect example of why representation matters, because not everyone is going to understand why we're triggered by certain things, or so that's awesome.
I'll also give you like a story, right? Like I remember being in my third year of university, going through a depressive episode, going to get counseling, could not relate to the white therapist because I literally felt like I was doing something wrong. Like there were so many layers. Thought therapy wasn't for me, thought I couldn't do this. And then fast forward many years, get into this profession, find a Black therapist, and I was like, oh, this is for me. You get this. I don't have to do over explaining. And I often hear my clients that are Black say the same thing to me. They're like, oh my goodness, finally I have a therapist that gets it. Finally I don't have to over explain. Finally I don't have to feel like my story is entertaining to somebody. Right? And I think, again, just me showing up is doing for my community, is that representation and bridging that gap, especially because there's so much barriers and so much stigma to mental health within Black communities, right? Like, I feel like we need to flip it on its head. I think it needs to be mental wellness.
Yeah.
You know, I think if it was mental wellness, everyone would be like, yeah, I want growth and personal development and self-care. Everyone would be so in tune to it. But as soon as you start to say, we're coming with like the bad parts that we don't want to focus on, we're coming with the things that have, I mean, I'm Jamaican and Nigerian. Like in Jamaica, if somebody is struggling with their mental health, we're calling them crazy. They're like, you know, we're coming with so much baggage and so much weight that holds. Yeah. Where it's like, okay, how do we flip it on its head? And it's really about self-growth. It's really about self-development. It's really about finding yourself, that self-actualization, right? Growing that self-esteem, feeling confident in yourself, your internal voices, leaning into your intuition more, right? Yeah. And that's just kind of what it looks like in my field, at least.
I had a point for you, actually, is because in our community is that we don't even recognize what's not okay. Like our threshold seems to be at a different stage because we've seen our parents do it and we lived through it, or we have to do it because we're carrying this load and it's hard to find, I don't know, another job. Or
that's the power of representation. Do you hear what you said? You said, we've seen somebody before us do that, so that's all we know.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
And oftentimes, as Black individuals, we've gone through a survival, right? We've only seen survival. So that's what we know. Exactly. And then we inherit, listen, I'm guilty of it. I'm not immune to it. Even as a mental health professional, I am not immune to it. Sometimes all I know and all I can remember is that survival. So it's so natural to go into that state. Yeah. And again, it's not a bad thing because it serves a purpose, but I think when we don't have to be in that, how do we know when to take off the hat? And how do we know if we've never seen anybody else do it?
That's why we need to hear it. That's why we need to see it. We need to, and we need to see the examples behind it. Because some people they think in a box, and sometimes you got to color outside the lines for them to see, like, oh, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't have to juggle 18 things in one day and not think of myself at all, or, you know, or if what do you call it? Wellness or whatever is not just about getting a pedicure. Is not just about, it really is taking care of how you think and the reasons why you do things. Yep, absolutely. So taking it on the flip side for me, photography, in terms of how I'm going to show up.
How do you show up for your community?
How do I show up for my community? I think because we're in, there's a lot of Black photographers in Ontario, a lot of great Black photographers in Ontario, but we're still not the majority. We're not even half. And if you go on a lot of galleries, you see they would have a few, I would say one, Black person represented in their gallery, and they may do that very well, but then we don't see. And I think that the photography, it's not only about just snapping that shot and getting the headshot. I really think that it should be for the individual. It really should speak a story to who the person is, their style, or whatever is working for them. They got a particular smile. You got to get that out of them to really represent it. And I hope that they see that in my work. And I also want it to be an experience. I want it to be storytelling, and I want it to be an experience, and I want them to walk away. I think it's linked to wellness as well. I want them to walk away with seeing the beauty in them, you know, the nugget in them. So when they look at it, it's a reminder that that really is me. I did that. It's not AI. You know what I mean? Like I was in that room and I showed up with that, whatever I had on, or with that makeup on, or whatever the case may be. Because I think we lose ourselves in our day-to-day so much. Me being a wife, being a mother, there was a period when I was really low and I couldn't see the pretty in me. That's to say it cute. That's to be cute about it. But yeah, I was just on the grind and being everything for everybody else that I couldn't see my worth. And if I can bring that out, and in my community that I love so much, I love melanin skin. I love. I love how we come out in photos and videos. I love the expression of our joy. I love the big laugh that when we are really laughing. I love how we show up in our style. You know, we can put on a tux jacket with some jeans and some Adidas and make it work. You know, I love how our style has influenced culture now. You know, I love how, and I want that to come out for everybody. And I want them to see the worth in themselves after they see those pictures. And I want them to go home with it and not have the image just live on their phone. I want it to live in your house. I want the image to be on their wall, so when it walks by, it makes an impact. Or even for, I feel like I'm talking fast and loud now because I'm just so passionate.
You haven't, listen, what I'm hearing is I'm hearing that storytelling. I'm hearing you bring out that storytelling piece. Yeah. That is so important. So girl, continue. Go ahead.
And I think that we need to go back to print in the house, because if our kids are not seeing those images of family, of connection, and it doesn't have to be all professional photos. It could be you guys at the family barbecue and you saw, and Uncle so-and-so fell flat on his ass and that was the big joke and someone took a picture. You know, the remembering of those times that we were connected, or you have people in your life, or that I was happy then, you know? So that's why I think imagery is important, and also I want us to be taken in a professional manner. I want us to have as much professional and artistic options as the other communities have, because just selfies is not good enough. And I don't think that, for instance, my kids' school pictures, like the class picture, they seem to struggle. They seem to struggle to find the balance between all the colors of skins in the classroom, and my kids are really in the shadows at the back. And I want equality there. I want them to see themselves and see that they're pretty, and them be confident in it as well. So I want the confidence to be visual and something they can go back to.
I love that. I feel like you said so much in that, and really what I heard and my takeaway from that is that storytelling piece, right?
Yeah.
That piece where we're able to share our memories, our moments, our style, our confidence, who we are, our laughter, every essence of what it is to be a Black individual. And I'm hearing, and when I heard your passion come out, my goosebumps came out on my wrist. I was like, yes, for this, yes.
I know, yeah.
And you know, it also made me think, you know, our body holds memories. So even being able to capture those moments, capture those memories, and going back to a time of what that felt like is wellness. So when I say there's so much power in what you're doing, how you're creating imagery, how you're telling the story, I think it's so powerful. And I think, you know, these are the difference of how you're leading in your space, right? You're wearing that leadership hat of, this is how I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna make it impactful.
Okay, all right, cool.
Yeah, one of the things from this segment, I'm pretty sure there's many takeaways, and you know, as anyone watching this, there's things that you can do, right? One, I always start with, how are you prioritizing your wellness? Making sure that you are prioritizing your wellness. Two, considering that representation. What does representation mean to you, and how do you show up representing your authentic self and your identity? And don't forget to support Shonda Rhimes in her Black Barbie documentary on Netflix.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. So my little takeaway would be, or my ad would be to show up. No matter what field that you're in, show up visually for our children, show up for yourself, and know that you matter. Take record of it as well, because going back on it and seeing yourself, no matter what stage that you're at, go back and look on yourselves image-wise or video-wise, however it is. Even look back at your accomplishments, and that will help to empower you. But also share that with the community. We want to see it. We spoke about it. Had we seen more of people in different fields, we could have saved time in our goals, in reaching our goals. So we want that for our children. We want that for this generation.
Thanks for watching.
That's awesome.
But like,
yeah.
Yeah.